We continue today with the 14th chapter of the book of Zechariah. Hine Yom Ba, L'Adonai v'chulak shilalech b'kirbeich. The day of God is coming when your spoils will be divided amongst you in your very midst. And we've seen this many, many times where we've talked about the Yom Hashem in this book and in other books, this apocalyptic vision, the plundering of enemies, God's return back to Jerusalem after all of the difficulties. Sounds bad, right? All the nations will gather to Jerusalem. They're going to wage, they're going to lay a siege. Right, they're going to go, they're going to plunder the city, they're going to violate, abuse the women. A part of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the population will not be uprooted. Parts of the population will remain. Okay? And then and then God will come and make war with those nations as a warrior goes out to battle on a day of war, similar to like the idea of Ki Hashem nilcham b'Mitzrayim, that God went to war against the Egyptians to save the Jews way back when. So it's not clear from here. We would understand based upon other statements, many statements in the books of the Tanakh, that perhaps the Jews who didn't listen, those were the ones who are going to be lost, who are not going to remain in Jerusalem. And then those who remained obedient, those who remained devout in the service of God, God will then come and wage war for them. Continuing in verse 4, Pasuk Dal v'amdu raglav bayom har hazeitim asher al pnei Yerushalayim mikedem v'nivka har hazeitim mechatzio mizracha v'yama gei gdola ma'od umash chatzi ahar tzafona b'chetzio negba. And on that very day, God's feet will stand on the Mount of Olives near Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will split across from east and west. One part will shift to the north, and the other part will go towards the south. So we see here a change in terms of the geography of Jerusalem, and that geography is supposed to be sort of reminiscent or symbolic, I should say, would be better, to God now taking over, the city being divided in a sense, half the people losing, and God now taking control. V'nastem gei harai ki agia gei harim el atzal v'nastem kasher nastem mipnei arash b'mei Uziel melech Yehuda v'Adonai Elohai kol kedoshim imach. And the valley of the hills will be stopped up, right? It will reach only, so the valley won't go as far. And it will be like a day like the earthquake in the days of King Uziel. He talks about the earthquake, King Uziel. I presume, if we remember back then from the book of Melachim, the understanding is that Uziel, who went and he tried to be, in a sense, Kohen Gadol, he got Sara'at, there was a Ra'ash, there was an earthquake. And so it's going to be a similar thing to that day. And all of the holy things will come to you following this. All of the holiness is going to begin. On their day there will be neither sunlight nor even moonlight, kind of like the eclipse, but no moonlight either. But on that day, which will be a continuous day, and only God knows when this day is going to be, there's going to be no light, there's going to be no darkness. Right, even in the evening, there's not going to be light. So this is a day that's supposed to be sort of a prep day, and it's hard to understand exactly, obviously what this means. That are about the future period, or whether you want to call it messianic, an apocalypse. It's hard to understand whatever these things mean and what they, sort of what they allude to. So is this saying that there's that now it's going to be a time of greatness, a time of happiness for the Jewish people? It's unclear exactly what it's going to be. But continuing verse 8, we'll see a little bit more. On that day, water will flow into Jerusalem, part from the eastern sea, part from the western sea, and it's continuing that day through the summer, through the winter. So somehow Jerusalem is now, water is coming in. The people are going to be able to live because there's water, and so there's going to be crops and water. We can understand here mayim as being chayim, as it says mayim chayim. So life, despite the darkness, despite not exactly clarity of what's happening, life is going to come back to Jerusalem. And then we have a verse that we know well, Vayad Elimelech al kol haaretz. On that day, following the apocalypse, following the destruction, when following the lack of light and the vacuum almost, and almost like a restart from the beginning, with Jerusalem being flowered, with the waters coming in, God will be known, and God and his name will be one, which is it's the end of the Aleinu prayer. And this is, in a sense, the messianic vision that the entire world will understand there is a reason. I like to think of it as sort of Einstein's unified theory, the theory that Einstein was looking for, trying to understand how this world, how do we understand this world? What is it? It seems like there's chaos and we don't understand what's going on, but there is a reason, there is a rationale, there is meaning, there is order to this world, and we know that there's some order. If we go back to the beginning, back to creation, there was tohu vavohu, there was chaos. Not everything was together, not everything was complete. And part of the vision of the idea of a unified world, of a single God, is that eventually, presumably through God and great human behavior, the rest of that tohu vavohu, the rest of that vacuum, the rest of that chaos will disappear. And the whole world will understand Hashem echad u'shmo echad, that there is one sort of purpose and meaning, and that will work in concert together. And thus, verse 10, Yisov kol haaretz karava migevel rimon negev Yerushalayim v'ramav yashva tachtel mishar binyamin ad makom shar harishon ad shar hapinim u'migdal Hananel ad yikvei hamelech. The whole country will become like the Arava. Okay, from Geva to Rimon, which is south of Jerusalem. They'll perch up high. It will be inhabited, so that the city, everywhere in the city, it's going to be inhabited. People are going to be all over the place. And there will not be, people will live there, and the end of destruction will happen. Yerushalayim, love that tach. And Yerushalayim will once again be fully secure. There's not going to be any more destruction. V'zotia, we're in verse 12. Amagefa asher yigov Adonai kol hamim tzavu al Yerushalayim hamek b'saro v'omed al raglav ve'inav timakna b'chorehen u'lishono timak b'fiyim. And the people who waged war, we talked about in the beginning of this chapter, when they waged war, they surrounded Jerusalem and they destroyed the homes and they abused the women and killed and etc. etc. What's going to happen? They're going to get plagues. Not so nice. Their flesh will rot away. Right, their eyes will rot away in their sockets, their tongues will rot away in their mouth. On that day, there'll be panic all over the place, and everybody's going to be grabbing for everyone else to help them. Keep me up, keep me up. Don't let this happen to me. And Judah will join the fight for Jerusalem. And all the wealth of the nations will be gathered in. That is to say, the Israelites, the Jews, Yehuda, Yerushalayim, is united with God, who understands that God controls the world, who understands that there is meaning, there is purpose to this world. They will ultimately gather everything. We're in verse 15. And the same plague will happen to the horses and the mules and the camels and the donkeys. All those in those camps. Is that fair? Is it right for the animals? What did they do wrong? Go back. Go back to the end of the book of Yonah, not the many chapters, when God says to Yonah, "Can I have mercy on these people?" And Behema Rabban, the many animals. So what has the animals done wrong? I don't know. I think it's just a sign of their wealth, the sign of their dominion, that it's all going to be destroyed. Their dominion, going back all the way to the Migdal Bavel, when they said, "I want to have a shame, I want to make a name for myself." No. This is about Hashem echad, Ushmo echad, and anything that you try to do to control that, to be greater than that, is going to disappear. We're in verse 16. So there will be some people from the nations who survive. And what are they going to do following these days of horror for them and destruction to those who attacked Israel, those who attacked Jerusalem, and in so doing so, they attack God. They are going to come up and make a pilgrimage year by year to Jerusalem and to observe specifically the Chag HaSukkot. Why the Chag HaSukkot? So presumably the reason is that Sukkot, I think we talked about it, 70 sacrifices on Sukkot, corresponding to the 70 nations, that almost during those days, it's like we pray for the different nations of the world, not just for ourselves. And so here, the Chag HaSukkot is impactful for that reason. It's a time for all of the nations to come up. And we read this on the last day of Sukkot, I believe, this Haftorah, this apocalyptic and messianic vision, if you want to put it as such, as depends on which side you are. If you're on the side of those who survive in Yerushalayim, I guess messianic. If you're on the side of those who get killed in the apocalypse, I guess it's more apocalyptic. But now the nations are all coming up. They realize Hashem echad u'shmo echad. Nevertheless, they're always holdouts. Verse 17, and those who don't come up to Jerusalem and they don't bow to God, they will receive no rain. And that, of course, is about Sukkot, is the time of rain. It's the beginning of the rainy season, the time when we have we begin saying Mashiv Aruch Barak Geshem after Sukkot. A little after that in Israel, we say V'tein Talamatar, asking God for rain. We're praying for rain. Start after Sukkot because we don't want it to rain on our Sukkot, but it's the time of the Nisuch HaMayim, it's the time of the libation of water, it's the time where we need rain. But if those in Egypt don't make the pilgrimage, it won't get the same affliction which the other nations have come up to, the other nations who didn't come up for Sukkot. Why is Mitzrayim, why is Egypt different? Well, because Egypt doesn't need rain. Distinction all the time in the Tanakh between Egypt and Israel. Israel is dependent upon the rain. Egypt is not. Egypt has the Nile. Egypt is the breadbasket. Egypt is irrigated on its own, and therefore their punishment will be different. This will be the punishment for Egypt and the other ones who don't come up. On that day, the bells, even the bells of the horses, will be inscribed holy to God. The metal pots in the house of God will be like basins. And what's going to happen on that day? All the metal pots and all the holy vessels will be to God, and all those who sacrifice and are involved in the sacrificial order, they will become, in a sense, protected by God, and those who don't, who will be, in a sense, outside, they will be punished. They will be seen as outsiders. They will be seen like the people who need to be removed from the vision of God. It's a very difficult, it's an ending. We say chazak, chazek to the book of Zechariah. It's a very strange, very difficult book to understand these apocalyptic visions. Why is Zechariah giving them to them? Is this the same Zechariah who's offering prophecy the years 520 to 517, the rebuilding the second Beit HaMikdash? Is this a second Zechariah, perhaps a slightly later Zechariah, as many academics and others have tried to argue with these more apocalyptic visions, that maybe it's not at this just the simple, hopeful time where, right, we think about Haggai, we think of the early chapters of Zechariah where it talks about the Zerubbabel becoming a great king and this small temple becoming great. Here it almost seems like we're at a worse time. Things have deteriorated. And so the visions are not just simply, we have the momentum, things are going well and things are going to be better, but it's about, some sort of destruction that we're threatened. And so there are those who look at these prophecies as being later. And as we said, Zechariah is a challenging book. It's a book that we have a couple of haftarot. Zechariah is living at a challenging time. And it's the early Second Temple period. But is this, as we said, the beginning of the building? Is this the end of the building? And I'll conclude with this. Maybe the most significant for us chapters of Zechariah are those middle chapters, when we're asked by the emissaries come to Zechariah and say, should we fast on the fast day now that we're building the temple? Do we have to fast anymore on Tisha B'Av? And what God says to them is, I didn't tell you to fast. I told you to be kind. I told you to be good. What I care about is building a just and equitable society. And if there's one message that we get from Zechariah, beyond all the other ones, beyond the difficulties of what's this vision supposed to be, what's that supposed to be, vision supposed to be, those words of his are the words that are said by all of the prophets of God. And ultimately, what all of these books are about are building kind, just, and equitable societies. We should do it in our own communities and hopefully see it done throughout the Jewish world and thus the greater world, so that these apocalyptic visions will be small and the Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad will be realized at large.